Here's how to fight the Frostnight Herra overworld boss for Columbina Hyposelenia in just under 3 minutes. This boss was introduced back in October 2025 in version 6.1 and was originally for Nefer, but since Columbina also uses the boss drops and she's quite the hot commodity right now, I figured I'd make a quick shorts guide for those looking for advice that isn't just to one-shot it with Maoika or something. As per usual, I'll be using characters the game is guaranteed to give you, alongside no limited 5-star weapons, so feel free to use whoever you want, but I'm keeping it free to play for the sake of the guide. However, this boss does have a special mechanic for lunar reactions, so I'll be going over that later with other characters, as unfortunately, as of version 6.3, Genshin doesn't give you any unit that can interact with lunar reactions, as both Aino and Traveler can't trigger them, so the mechanic is still locked behind limited characters. When you approach the boss, it'll do a slow descent to the floor. From here though, it will do around 4 to 5 attacks before moving on to the DPS phase. The attacks it will do in this first phase are pretty obviously telegraphed. They include Floating Head Orb to fire homing projectiles, Dive Bomb that takes 2 business days, a 3-stage ring attack that swipes, X swipes, then a bigger swipe, and last a 360 swing. Once you see it disappear, it'll then reappear in the middle of the arena, and will do these fast line attacks for just under 10 seconds, then release this big boom that will launch you if you're close enough, but you can dodge out of it. From here, it will then repeat the same attacks as before, but if you go too far, it will then slam the ground to send a big shockwave at you, then throw 2 air blades at you, all while dropping moon rocks on your head, so I'd advise you stay closer to the boss at this time. However, during this phase, take note of this little circle here, as you need to fill this meter with attacks, and once you fill it up, it will most likely infuse with a particular element. The way this works is rather interesting, as it takes into consideration 2 different metrics. The first metric is that it counts how many instances of damage you deal against a boss, and in the overworld, it will count 50 hits before the meter fills up. However, if you use lunar reactions, the meter will fill up more quickly, so rather than 1 hit counting for 1 instance, it will count multiple instead. The second metric that it counts, which I also believe is much more important, is how much damage you do to the boss during this phase, and the element that you use matters, as it does make itself immune to your most damaging element. To exemplify this, you can see here that I used Pyro Traveler and Amber to swirl Lynette's elemental burst. However, because I used Lynette's skill, which did a ton of damage, the boss ended up infusing Anemo, even though I hit it with a lot of Pyro beforehand. Thus, it now is immune to Anemo, and its attacks are now infused with Anemo until the next DPS phase. So the main takeaway is not to use your main DPS unit during this phase, as you could potentially lock yourself out of dealing damage for a good minute. The exception to this rule is physical attacks or lunar reactions, so if you do the majority of your damage with physical hits or lunar reactions, it won't infuse any element. You can see here me using normal attacks with New Valette to trigger lunar charge with Anefa. The boss didn't infuse anything, allowing me to deal more damage unhindered. Infusing the boss isn't all bad though. You can get pretty creative with this, like making it infuse cryo like you see here, and then taking your pyro units and melt it away. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for this boss. A little complicated on paper, but in practice, it's pretty simple. Anywho,